ActiveNet down at Stansted last year. And it's part of a presentation that's going to be delivered in later on this month in Scotland, but I'm going to be utilising a lot of Scottish data. So those that do know me will know that I worked in leisure for, gosh, 17 years. My main area was Knowsley at the time. Started off as a lifeguard, worked my way
Sorry,
up.
Carl, just hold a second. Andy, did you say something?
Yeah, it's on we're seeing the presenter screen.
Okay. Okay.
Good shout.
So you know.
Oh, that's interesting. So you're not seeing. So you're seeing the presenter screen. It doesn't really matter if you are. Can you see everything on it?
Just so you know, yeah. So we're seeing it, what you're seeing effectively.
Yeah. Okay. Let me just see.
That's better.
How's that? That better?
Yeah.
Cool.
Perfect.
Okay. Yeah. Fine. It's only because I've got 3 screens up and running at home. Okay. So yeah, I worked in leisure at Knowsley, and then whilst at Knowsley, I moved into public health, into one of the first local authority public health teams. And then from there, I moved to Staffordshire and became a senior commissioner for public health. I worked in North Staffordshire for 16 years, I think, working up and down the country, championing various different things. But I've always found myself reaching back into leisure for some reason, probably because it's part of my DNA. I love leisure, and I love the potential that leisure plays within communities and the things that it can actually deliver on behalf of people. So I'm going to help introduce you, and I'm going to focus on some data and insights in relation to aging and older people, and some of the things that you can actually access to help you understand what your local priorities might well be in relation to the older populations. So we're all aging. I think that's a matter of fact. From the day we're born, we begin to age. In the 20s, the average age of death for a male was 56 years old and 59 years old for a female. Any idea what the life expectancy is today for England? Let's go for males. Any ideas? Anybody want to shout out a number? If it was 56 in the 20s, what might it be in 2020? Probably going back to 21, 23.
82.
Females?
79.
Okay. So the median, and this is at age of death, is 82.3 years for males and 85.8 for females. So we're going to go back to school here, and what we have to get used to when we're looking at data and statistics, we need to understand what the mean, the median, the mode, and the range to help us calculate various averages. So when you work in public health, these are the type of things you begin to deal with, because sometimes we quote figures, but we're actually quoting the wrong figure. So little box on the side there helps you understand what those things actually mean. I'd recommend, if you're a little rusty on the old maths and these mean, median, and modes and range, then go online, have a little look, just bring yourself up to speed, because at the end of the day, we need to be quoting the right information, and we also need to be able to correct people when they quote the wrong information. And I'll touch onto that a little bit later on. A sobering thought: 82 years is 29,930 days. 85 years is 31,025. So if we actually count in days, I'm 58. So in days wise, I've probably only got about 10,000 days, if that, left. It's interesting when we put it into that context and we look at things in days. It's a little bit of a sober thought. But I believe many of us here in this room right now possess a gift that can shape the world that we need, and I'll come on to that in a little while. So people will be aware the last census, which was in 2021, all the data came out, and I'm going to introduce you to the census tool. So make sure that you can go into the census tool and build up some very localized data and information about your communities. But in 2021, there were 10.4 million people aged 65 and over. and that's a 52% increase since 1981. The trajectory around population is only going one way. We are seeing an increasingly aging population. Blame public health and blame probably the 70s and 80s, where the big focus, certainly during the 80s, was on preventing people from dying young. So we look at all of the things that happened during the 70s and 80s when leisure centres and public facilities were being built to help manage communities. The majority of those things were actually built to help manage health of communities and education of communities. Therefore, blame those individuals that made the decisions back in the 70s and 80s that were actually all living longer. There are some caveats to that, and I'm going to introduce a little bit about that to you a bit later on. So if we just look at where physical activity slots into all of this, when we look at physical activity, obviously everybody knows it's bloody good for us and it's good for you throughout your aging process. So on that screen, and when you get a copy of this slide deck, you'll be able to follow up on the hypertext links. All of the information in here, where there's a line or a hypertext link, it'll take you to the various information. But at the end of the day, aging is a process, and I say we're all aging, but physical activity does play a role in helping everybody age better. And I think that that is a key word, better. There are 8 domains for aging-friendly communities. Some organisations might actually be working with various partners around age-friendly communities. I look at this from the Centre of Aging Better. Again, there's a hypertext link at the bottom of the page there. But you know, there are 8 domains: outdoor spaces, transportation, housing, social participation, respect, civic participation, communication, and community support and health services. These are all of the key elements that help people age better. Without any of those petals, so if we remove transportation, the whole system breaks down. Older people have to be able to get from A to B, and if they want to get to an outdoor space or a facility for healthcare or a leisure centre, the majority of older people will require some form of transportation. In South Staffordshire, which is one of the key areas that I work in, car ownership is one of the highest in the country, and simply because there are hardly any community transport opportunities for people. So people in South Staffordshire are driving much more into their old age. And as we know, as people enter old age, not only physical issues start to come about, but also mental issues start to come about. And there is a real challenge, I believe, as transport has been reduced over the years. Older people have got a much more heavier reliance on their own personal transport, and there's huge pressure related to that affordability and also just the ability to drive safely. So there are some real concerns there around transport. But again, Centre for Aging Better, really good resources, loads and loads of really good stats, and you can introduce a number of those stats into any of your thoughts and ideas and presentations. So they've got loads of slide sets that you can nick and borrow. So why should we focus on older people? Dead simple, the data tells us to. So what I'm going to do now is introduce you to some of the information that I've managed to harvest over the past couple of years. If we just look at Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent and why people engage with social care and ask social care for help, that chart tells us everything. Access to food, assistance with shopping, loneliness and isolation, carer support, employment opportunities. People have financial issues, equipment, so, you know, access to technology, mobility issues. Believe it or not, the 3 top reasons why people engage with Staffordshire County Council, older people engage with Staffordshire County Council, are knowledge of community activities and what to do. 75% of calls or searches on the County Council website are related to, I don't know what to do. The second highest one is loneliness and isolation. And the third highest one, unsurprisingly, over the past 18 months to 2 years, is around access to affordable food. So these types of patterns might be replicated elsewhere. Absolutely guarantee in the top 5 in any organization, local authority organization, the reason for anybody contacting the council or your services is knowledge of what to do. And that's going to be the largest proportion of any engagement. At the local level, you'll be aware that, you may be aware that you have primary care networks. So in Staffordshire, there are all of our primary care networks. They've all been RAG rated in relation to the population of over 65s. So you can see moorlands and rural, that's the PCN up top near Leek and Biddulph and so on. They have a population of older people of around about 26%. But where the red ones and the orange blobs exist, that's where the largest population of older people live. Unsurprisingly, it tends to be in the rural communities, but there are, if we look at the urban areas, i.e. Newcastle, Stoke-on-Trent, East Staffordshire, Stafford, Central, we can't ignore those lighter blobs, those grey and yellow blobs, simply because the numbers of the individuals that live there are significantly higher than the rural populations alone. However, if we're actually going to do really positive work, we need to really be focusing on those areas that are red. And if you don't know where your PCNs are, there's a hypertext link there in the right-hand side of the box. There's a PCN is normally around about 48,000 people. So the average is 30 to 50,000, but 35% of PCNs have a population of over 80,000 people. So certainly when we're getting into those big urbanized areas like London and so on. But if you follow the hypertext link, you'll go and identify where your PCNs are. The population aged 65 and over in the UK is projected to continue to increase. So think about it, in the next 20 years, there's another third increase on those numbers that we talked about earlier. So therefore, we need to be planning now. We really do need to be planning now, because this is a perfect storm. If again, I look at the issues that are affecting Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent, these are some data that came out a little while ago now. But if we look at long-term conditions for those individuals who are 65 years and older, and those that experience cardiovascular disease, those who are overweight and obese, those with diabetes, dementia, depression, those that have accessed hospital due to a fall, and those with bronchitis or emphysema, all of those statistics are going one way. There is a significant increase. For me, the 3 key things that we're focusing on in Staffordshire is dementia, is falls, and is also to do with diabetes. So there's 3 key themes there. If we just look at dementia alone, there's going to be an increase of individuals with dementia by from 2020 through to 2030 of 18%. If we look at falls, 29% increase over a 10-year period is significant. So we really need to be focusing on, I use the depression one there, not dementia one, 26% for dementia. If we use, if we just use those 2 things as a focus area of targeted populations, and there'll be some crossover between dementia and falls, we need to be working with our partners in relation to those 2 particular areas. Just for an example, falls are the #1 reason why an older person goes to hospital. In 5% of the cases, a fall will result in fracture and hospitalization, so it will result in a stay in hospital. Unaddressed fall hazards in the home are estimated to cost the NHS £435 million a year. That's probably cautious, conservative figure there. Helping individuals mitigate falls and introduce some falls education into any kind of activity that we do for older people will be of benefit. Simple slip, trip and fall hazards at home are a massive risk of falls for anybody over the age of 60. the real shocking bit of data is, if you have 2 falls within 12 months, you're more likely to die within 12 months of the second fall. So it's you know, it's unbelievable. There are individuals, even at the first fall, will die in situ because they can't get to a phone or they can't raise a call with anybody, and they will die in situ, and they will die of hypothermia or internal bleeding. So again, these are really serious issues that can be avoided. Some of the stuff which will relate to where you guys are, so polypharmacy. So this is, you know, those individuals who are taking 5 or more medications, that increases up to 50% once you reach 75. So there are individuals, 50% of individuals 75 plus will be taking 5 or more medications. The big challenge around that is concordance, so encouraging people to take the medications as prescribed. So, you know, taking them at the time or with food or staggered throughout the day. If anything like my father, who's had late onset diabetes, you know, he's 84 this year. Unsurprisingly, he's taken around about 5 medications a day. He takes them all at once, and that's not necessarily the best way to do things. So really, we need to help people be better educated around how they should be taking medications. And believe it or not, just because of concordance, people tend not to take medications, and there's a massive amount of return that goes back into the NHS. Once a medication is returned, it can't be used, even if it's unopened and still sealed in a package. So hearing loss is a big issue for older people. 25% of people have mild or worsening hearing loss once they reach 65 or older. Then we've got the inactivity challenge. I'm going to come on to that in a little bit later on. Those who are depressed, you know, again, 25% of people depressed, 30% of people fall once you get to 65 or over. And then loneliness. Loneliness is a recognized contribution to cardiovascular disease. It's as just a higher contribution to cardiovascular disease as smoking does as you age. So it's a massive issue, loneliness and isolation. Health is the leading reason why people over the age of 50 and 64 are out of work. So again, there's a real good opportunity here to help people be better prepared physically for work into older age. And I was listening to something on the radio the other day, and it's highly likely that the pensionable age is going to increase again to 67 and then to 68. Don't be surprised in the next 20 years that pensionable age will be 70. So again, we need to prepare people for working longer, and the only way to do that is to make sure that they're physically able and capable to do so. In Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent, we've categorised our older people into 4 categories. So the severe frail, the moderately frail, the mild frail, and then the remaining population. So there's 96,000 older people who we can be at the bottom of that pyramid. I listened earlier on to Louise talking about the pyramid. Well, we've got one for frailty, 96,000 people there. We need to be doing more with those 96,000 people now to prevent them from moving up that pyramid. Again, you are likely to have data and information that's similar to this available at the local level. And what we need to understand is, where are our health communities focusing their efforts? Is it severe? Is it moderate? And is it mild? I'd probably argue it's between the mild and the moderate, helping people to at least not move into that severe frailty category. The emerging health and social care landscape, we've all heard of ICSs and ICBs, integrated care boards and integrated care systems. Again, there's hypertext links on the right. So if you followed that, it'll take you to the link and you'll be able to find your ICS or your ICB. The ICBs is 42 nationally. In Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent, we've looked at it across 8 domains. And what I've done here is I've circled those domains. Green tells me that there's a definite link to older people. Amber tells me there's a link to older people. So I sit on the frailty board, and I also sit on the end of life and frailty board for the ICB. There are 3 Staffordshire elected representatives from the voluntary and social and charitable sectors who sit on those boards. So we're able to listen and to hear what the decision making is. We're also able to contribute and challenge some of those ideas and thoughts that the ICB are and the ICS is generating. You will have something similar. You'll probably have slightly different priorities or different pillars, but generally speaking, they will look the same. 22% of men and 33% of women provide unpaid care. I'd argue that this is probably becoming now quite unsustainable. When we talk about unpaid care, that obviously has a massive impact on our abilities, on a person's ability to work, time, the ability to do other things for themselves. And if anybody's actually had a caring role, what you end up doing is probably forgetting about yourself and focusing far more on the person you're caring for. So your health actually decreases over time. In Staffordshire, this is of a South Staffordshire, it's of a particular issue. So back in 1985, there were 6 people who were able to look after an older person. So that would be family who were able to look after an older person. So the ratio back in 1985 was 6-1. By 2030, there will be 2-1. There's loads of reasons for that. Urbanization or people moving for work, but more importantly, in rural communities like South Staffordshire, house affordability is a massive issue. So house prices have pushed families out. So families are far more distant now than ever before. You know, I've lived in Staffordshire for 30 years, but all my family and my father still lives in Knowsley. So, you know, I'm an example of probably going back to, you know, 2000 or so. But there is a big challenge there in relation to those ratios. So who's going to be looking after these people? And if we go back a lot of the people that already look after older people are old themselves. We've got a real challenge coming towards us. Life expectancy. There appears to be some information currently that life expectancy is halting, so it's quite static at the minute. But the real big problem is that by the time you reach 65, nearly 50% of the population have a long-term condition or disability. So we've got a big issue there. As we're aging, we're actually got more complex needs. So I thought I'd share you some data to help you determine some of your local priorities, or at least hone in on some of those priorities so you're better prepared to make a case. So what data is useful? Firstly, data needs to be robust, it needs to be evidence-based, and it needs to be relevant. There's no point using irrelevant data, i.e. from America or Europe, when local data is currently readily available to us. I found it on Google. Nah, doesn't meet the above in any shape, form, or means. I've been there. I've been in meetings. Oh, have you seen this latest information on Google? You know, and I've done a light search, and it tends to be grey literature. Critical analysis is a learned skill, but soon becomes rusty. So if you're really good at critical analysis in balancing the various information that is available and really crunching it and trying to understand it, who produced it and the reasons why, great. But you need to use lots of information to come to a balanced view. But if you don't use critical analysis regularly, it will become rusty and we will get lazy. We need to hone it. And the rapid growth in AI raises huge trust concerns. People are becoming instant experts. And I'm going to shake that one now. Even Google Trends. So individuals may know about Google Trends, the hot link. You can go on there and have a look at it. It's been going now for quite a few years. But the real data geeks are disputing the value of Google Trends. And I've picked off here something from the Sage journals recently, who this was a person who did some research around the value of Google Trends. There was a real lean towards Google Trends in the late 90s, early 20s, and the findings from this individual, the results strongly indicate that scientists in all fields should refrain from using the tool Google Trends when conducting research. So this comes about through data that's being harvested via, your use of a mobile phone or your search history, which is all put into a massive farm, and then Google Trends pulls all that out. The issue is that people use various tools to do their search, and therefore the data that's being collated is just so vast, it's just inaccurate. Nobody is able to harvest the amount of information that's being generated currently. So we've got to be really careful about how we use anything that's on the internet. I just want to show you a concept of, or introduce you to the concept of locality mapping. No doubt some of you have done stuff like this, but I want to focus on one area in South Staffordshire where I've been working quite closely with the local authority. South Staffordshire has 5 areas. Locality 3 is the #1 locality of interest or priority because it's the most populated. 33% of the population live in that locality, and Cheslin Hay, as you can see on this map here, is more or less right in the top of the locality, and Cheslin Hay is right next door to Cannock. We've just relocated one of our care services to Cheslin Hay because of the data that I've generated through this tool here. Has anybody used the new census tool?
Nope.
Anybody?
Yeah, I have recently.
Anybody else? Okay, so new census tool, this came out a little while ago now. If you want to focus on an area, literally all you need to do is build a custom area profile. I put in Great Worley and Cheslin Hay. You'll see that there's a population of 17,600 people there. And it'll give, because I've put in age and population as the filters, it shows you here that Cheslin Hay, if you look at the lines, if you can see my arrow, if you look at the lines, they're the national averages, but look at Cheslin Hay. It's an aging population in Cheslin Hay, much lower numbers of younger people, much higher numbers of older people in Cheslin Hay. So it makes sense for me to locate services in a community or urban area that has a high population of older people. And also it's the #1 priority area for South Staff's District Council. So the tool that's available to you in the census tool has 34 different filters. They all are there for you. So you can actually overlay lots of data to help you prove a point or to help you understand what the challenges are for those particular communities. And you can get all of this down to ward level. I've used it to generate maps so you can see where all of the dark blue is, here and here and here and here. That tells me over 24-25% of that population is over 65 years old. So the lighter areas, that's telling me that, the population in those areas of over 65 is much less. Therefore, I can actually zoom in on areas and focus on particular issues. So if we just go back to the filters, we can choose a number of those filters to overlay and generate a map that will light up and tell us where those things are happening, or the numbers of population that are being affected by those particular issues. So if we were looking at, for example, population, and then we were looking at the number of households in that area, it would generate the number of households and how many people live in that area, how many people have a car or a van, how many bedrooms, national identity. So if we were doing some ethnicity work and trying to target or identify different ethnicities, we'll be able to identify where those populations actually live in those communities, or the numbers of the density of those populations in those communities. A really easy tool to use, and not a lot of people use it to the benefits that it possesses. So I would argue that you need to layer your data. So really you need to understand what your needs are, what your priorities are, and also do a bit of research. What are the drivers for change at the local level? So the drivers for change will come from your local authority corporate plans, your NHS locality plans, and the devolution plans, maybe, depending on where you operate. And then you can overlay that with IMD, joint strategic needs assessments, JSNA stuff, and census stuff. And it's always good to look at trends, so you can actually demonstrate using the census tool from the last census to the current census, or censuses before, the trends, so you can actually see what's happening over time in those areas, and that's really useful to help inform what your decisions should be honing in on. What I did do, I did look at how many some of the organizations that have LATCOs, and I noted that Hounslow had one. So Hounslow have a really good data hub. So literally you go on stats.hounslow.gov.uk, they're already harvesting some of this data. It's really good. Most local authorities have these data hubs now. If your local authority doesn't have one, your regional public health team is likely to have one. And at the regional team, they have bods who are able to churn this out quite easily. So if you're looking for a very specific issue, it might well be that you might need to reach out to your public health regional team to help you if your local team can't. But, you know, what I wanted to demonstrate is that organizations have got a real richness and understanding of data at the local level. What I did here using the mapping tool the Hounslow provided is I looked at leisure centres, I looked at community centres, looked at traffic and environment, and applied them to ward boundaries. So you can see there all the bits and pieces start to map. So again, some of these tools are already available at the local level, and the census tool overlapping on this will be hugely helpful for you to determine what your local priorities are. But again, we've got to understand that there's a massive variation in the proportion of people with 3 or more long-term conditions, and surprise, surprise, the more urbanized the area, the more likely a person is going to have 3 or more long-term conditions. Dead interesting. I'll come on to that in a second. Compared to the wealthiest and the poorest, if we're looking at women in the most in the poorest communities are 2 times more likely to have type 2 diabetes, twice as likely to have respiratory illnesses, and 4 times more likely to have depression. Really sad indicator of inequality. And then also for men, you can see there, but you look at the score for men and depression, 5 times more likely if you come from a poorer community, which is, yeah, a really stark reflection of current society, unfortunately. So solutions, for me, it's around using some of the old school stuff, making every contact counts, ask, advise, assess, assist, and arrange. So our front of house people need to be prepared with information and advice, ask the right questions at the right time, and willing to arrange things for people. Not just, oh, if you go here or you look there online or you go down here, you know, literally help and direct people to arrange things that they can action themselves. The whole of our sectors, certainly the social enterprise and the community and charitable sectors, need to come together, and we need to be wrapping things around people within their communities. This asset-based community development type stuff. It's been around now for years. Who's still doing it? Who should be doing it? Be prepared to deliver things closer to where hotspots are evident. So using the mapping tools, you can actually identify. So going back to the PCN data that I provided, I've looked at that, and that's helping me determine where I need to locate our services and interventions. So we need to be prepared to do pop-up type things, and then when things have cooled down, be prepared to move those interventions elsewhere, not just remain static. We need to be flexible, and we need to be moving as these issues move across communities. And then coming into the physical activity stuff, which I know everybody is interested about, but I also know you should understand this and you should really know it. If you're between 55 and 74 and from the poorest neighborhoods, you're twice as likely to be physically inactive than those in the wealthiest communities. And there's some of the stats that as you age, inactivity decreases with age. As you get towards 65, 30% of people are less active. And then as we start getting towards 75 and 84, and these age groups here are the ones that falls are starting to really come into their risk factors. So really we need to be doing stuff for those individuals. Just coming up to the last couple of slides now. So where do we look for evidence of what works, and how do we link interventions with existing clinical pathways? So you'll be aware that the British Heart Foundation, Chief Medical Officer, all those types of organisations and people have produced lots of information. This is 2019, it's never changed. So the guidance for older people has pretty much been the same for quite some time. If you go into, I always try to provide at least 2 examples. So we've got the UK example here, or the English example here, and then we've got the Finland example. I always find the Finland one really good, and it presents the similar information but in a slightly different way. Then we've got stuff like from BASES, information there. Again, that's been around for ages as well, 2019. None of this has really changed. And then we've got links to clinical interventions where physical activity will actually have a beneficiary contribution. So NICE and the NHS clinical pathway systems, musculoskeletal, diabetes, mental health, depression, and falls all have national pathways. So if you follow the hypertext links on the right where it says document title, it'll take you, for example, to the musculoskeletal pathway where physical activity will be talked about, type 2 diabetes and adults pathway where physical activity is talked about. So what I've provided here is, if I'm talking around falls, I often utilize the language that's within the falls and older people assessing risk and prevention stuff that the NHS and NICE champion. So we need to be using the same language of our peers. And then lastly, I just wanted to introduce the core 20 plus 5. So if you're not aware of this, this is good if you're not aware of it, but the second question is, why aren't you aware of it? So the core 20 is, there are 20 local authorities that have been identified where the core 20 plus 5, so the 5 are maternity, mental illness, respiratory disease, early cancer diagnosis, hypertension, and smoking cessation. So if you're fortunate enough to be in a core 20 area, there is a increased collaborative approach around those 5 themes. So can anybody tell me, out of the 20 local authorities, who might be on there?
Greater Manchester.
Well, Manchester, any others?
Birmingham.
Knowsley.
Go on, any more? I'm gonna put them up. There you go. Knowsley's number 3.
Yeah.
Manchester's
And
number
Liverpool. I was
5.
just about to say Liverpool, yeah.
Yeah. So they're the top 20 or the core 20 local authority areas. So there are collaborative efforts addressing those 5 themes. So if you are wanting to use some common language, quote core 20. Quite recently, Chris Whitty, next slide, please. That's the man. He produces annual report. It was the first annual report he's produced because obviously when he landed in his job, I think he'd been in his job 3 months and COVID hit. So it's his first annual report, Health in an Aging Society. It's a really interesting read, really complex, some of the issues that are affecting older people. And one of his biggest concerns at this moment in time is the amount of people that reach retirement age and decide to move to the seaside. So he raises this as a big issue because seaside communities are attractive to older people because, you know, everyone wants to retire in a nice beachside location or seaside location. But what many people fail to grasp is really poor transport. The towns are only really alive during key periods during the year. And other than that, they tend to be really flat and not a lot going on. And the services, GPs, hospitals, and so on are quite sparse and under-resourced. So that's a really interesting statistic that I drew from that document. But again, it's hypertext link. If you follow that, you'll find it online. And then I just wanted to finish with this. Everyone knows the old Dick Van Dyke, don't they? So in my 30s, exercise to look good, 50s to stay fit, 70s to stay ambulatory, in the 80s to avoid assisted living. Now in my 90s, I'm just doing it out of pure defiance. You know, we look at Dick, and he's certainly a fit chap, but he's used his physical activity purposely. You know, in his it says, you know, from his 30s looking good all the way through to avoiding assisted living. I think he's probably got it right, hasn't he? So thank you.
Wow. Carl, thank you so much for that. That's really, really useful. If you can send me that presentation, I'll distribute it with the recording from today, because I think there's some really interesting content in there to direct. I've got 3 questions, but I'm going to always go to the group of people that are in front of me and just ask, is there anything anybody wants to know from Carl? Please, if you could raise your hands, that would be useful, just so I can get an order. Anybody?
I might know the answers, but
Andy King.
Yeah, just Carl, thank you for that. That's an absolute gold mine of information with all the hyperlinks on it and everything else. And it's just a thought. I mean, we do in Greater Manchester, Mr. Oxley does a transformational leadership program for our managers, and I'm just thinking this video, to be honest, and what you've just presented would be perfect, to be honest with you. We touched on some of those things, but not in that detail. So I don't know whether we could actually nick what you've just done and actually use it in a sort of educational way. It's superb. Thank you very much. Cool. In terms of, what do you think? Just in terms of the question, might be a stupid question, but when we look at the aging population and the extrapolations of like falls, for instance, in particular, getting so much worse, you know, it's 20% increase. Is that simply because of the aging population? Is it just a correlation to that, or is there something else going on that people are more susceptible to falls?
There are a number of reasons why people are susceptible to falls, but the majority of those reasons are people sit on their arse all day.
Yeah, so we're getting more sedentary.
Yeah, the more sedentary you are, the fact that, you know, you're losing the strength and the coordination of just getting up and out of a seat, for an example. Obviously, as you age, there are other things that are happening in the head and in the body, i.e. circulation. So, you know, everybody's had it when you've been tying your laces and you get stars and you suddenly rise from tying your laces or something. That happens more commonly when you age. So, you know, it's all related to blood pressure. If you're moving into the dementia area of issues, then again, you know, vascular dementia has a huge and significant interest on body mobility and coordination. And similarly, you know, if you've had injuries or you've worked in a manual trade, you're going to have bad knees, bad hips, bad shoulders, bad whatever, and they're all going to contribute to you as you age in your ability just to simply get out of a chair safely and step on a step or step over a rug, or I'd say put on your shoes or you know, whatever. And they're always the high risk activities for older people. Going to the toilet, you know, it's a high risk activity as you age, but which is why when we provide our day centres for older people, that's why we have to quite often support people just going to the toilet. How many families have the ability to support an older person going to the toilet? No, I'm okay. It's embarrassing. Dignity, all that type of stuff comes in. But, you know, I've done all that with my dad. You know, I've had to wipe his backside. I've had to do all that, take them to the toilet and shower and all the rest of it. You get over it, but some families never actually broach it and, you know, and break through that. So a lot of older people are left to do it themselves and they're not able to do so. So therefore, they're at a high risk of fall. But slips, trips and falls in the home, the majority are due to steps, stairs and rugs.
Wow.
Steps, stairs and rugs. It's bonkers.
Yeah.
Okay, Louise.
Yeah, again, I didn't really have a question. I sort of obviously followed obviously a lot of what you were doing. I mentioned earlier that the sports development team had come across from the council to PAL. Whilst in the council, they were sat in public health. So in terms of working alongside a lot of those data boards and getting a lot of that insight, you know, we were, I suppose, very lucky to sort of almost have that embedded in us. So we've, you know, taken that with us and still have very strong links to the council. But I suppose it's just, again, a bit of information sharing, and it's that Plymouth are launching an Aging Well plan, and they're going to be launching it on the 1st of October, which is obviously National Older People Day. So again, there's a lot of, I suppose, political will and collaboration around hitting all of those areas, you know, under a number of themes, and, you know, the transport, as you mentioned, and participation and housing and communication. So I suppose it was just sort of sharing that, you know, Plymouth is again, don't know where it will go, how successful it will be, as always, but it is, I suppose, again, taking it seriously. As you said, it's high up the agenda for us. So, you know, PAL need to, you know, make sure it's aligning and playing its part in contributing where relevant.
Louise, can I ask, have you been asked as Plymouth Active Life to contribute to that strategy that you've just described that's going to be launched in October?
Yes. So again, probably, and again, I can't say whether it, you know, it's probably as a default of me being one of the lead officers in the council for physical activity for the length of time I have, and now obviously I'm sat within, so it's almost like that, you know, wearing the two hats, but now I'm obviously totally in PAL. So it's, you know, I'm still the sort of, you know, that being horrible, go-to person. It's like, oh yeah, Louise, get Louise on the board. So yeah, so one, I'm sitting on the board, which obviously helps influence things and makes us, you know, makes me bring strategy back into PAL in terms of our business and what we can do and how we can change things, maybe make our gym equipment more. We're just about to have a gym refurb. So again, a lot of this, you know, a lot of the machines, could we be looking at, you know, how they can help with falls prevention and strengthening, how we can look at women's health, maybe more around, again, strength exercises, but again, without it being, you know, having to fit into a mainstream, you know, gym and lycra, and, you know, so how can we make it more, the offer more, you know, appealing to those people, so it's not overwhelming, underwhelming, because, you know, gyms can be scary places and maybe people don't feel it is for them, but what it can offer in terms of, like you say, those strength exercises, it you know, can be crucial for a lot of people in terms of the impact, you know, and of the consequences of aging as well, not just what they may be suffering.
All down to relationships again, Louise. Thank you. Carl, I've got a couple of questions, if that's okay. You used a word that I'd never heard before. You were talking about medication and taking medication all at the same time. I think you would use the word concordance.
Concordance.
What does that mean?
Concordance. Taking medication as prescribed.
Right.
So basically following a rule.
Following the instruction, right.
Yeah. So we did a piece of research when I was in public health in Staffordshire. We did a piece of research, and I'm going back years now, but we did a piece of research about how practices and pharmacies actually wrote take one a day on a, there was over 100 different ways of writing take one a day or saying take one a day, when what they meant was take one a day. You know, unbelievable. So concordance, and as you age, obviously it gets more confusing.
Right.
So what you now see from pharmacies is pre-packaged tablets coming in various, you know, formats, and they're on like a roll, and you can pull them off every day or whatever. The thing is, though, that a lot of those tablets are taken all at once, right, or not taken at all. and therefore I think 75, I'm going back now, 75% of medication is not taken as prescribed.
Right. Okay.
So it's as you age, it's really important that you take the right medication at the right time throughout the day to match your needs throughout the day. Your needs are not the same first thing in the morning as they are late in the afternoon or early evening. And so concordance is really important. And obviously, if you live alone, if you're in an isolated community, if you're confused and you can't be bothered, or you can't get out of your chair to go to the cupboard to get your medication, you're not going to take them.
Okay, thank you. I just never heard the word before, so it was interesting to pick up.
You've heard something new, David.
This will surprise you because you know me. I'm currently reading All In by Lisa Nandy, who's the Minister for DCMS. And it's really interesting because it's all about her background, where she came from, international aid, what she learned, and this whole piece around inclusivity and not excluding anyone from anything. And I think what you've shown us here is there's actually an awful lot of insight and data that we can get our hands on so that we're not exclusive, that we are starting to think about being inclusive. So thank you so much for that. But in that political piece, is there a view that prevention is going to become more of a theme or sit alongside the work the NHS does, etc.? What are you hearing? What are you feeling around the prevention agenda?
Wow. Do you know what, David? Not a lot at the moment.
Right.
It seems to, I think this past sort of probably 10 years, it's sort of stagnated. We all know public health teams have shrunk massively. The influence of a director of public health has reduced significantly because they tend to be now cutting across a number of different actions and activities within local authorities. I think the NHS are really struggling at the moment. Staffordshire, they've got to find another 30%. Another 30%. That's on the 30-odd% that when I was there, on the 30-odd% that they had to find 5 years ago, and another 30% they've got to find, in the next 2 years. It's all coming out of the same. It's all coming out of the same tin, I suppose. But the prevention stuff, there are just a number of very core messages that are coming through. I think there's going to be a big focus that's coming out now around obesity. And certainly the advertising that's announced more or less today, quite hot off the press or yesterday, and that's going to come in next year. But other than that, the preventional stuff, smoking and vapes probably. They're the two. Obesity, smoking and vapes. They're the two. Right. That's all you really hear at the moment, and rightly so, I suppose, because it's big, expensive responses that are required to manage those things.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Carl. Any other questions from anybody else on the call? No? Okay. I think it's going to take a little bit of time just to have a play with that presentation that you can send us so that we can localize it and get to understand what it means for us in our locations. And it may be, Carl, that having done that in, I don't know, 6 months' time or whatever, we ask you to come back. Because I think if people use those tools that you've given us, and I'm sure people do use them already, but there'll be a whole load more there to add to our armory, and just see what difference we've made as a result. It would be a really interesting conversation. So,
cool. Okay, good. Thank you.
Excellent. Anything from anybody else? Right. Well, in that case, Carl, we'll let you go, and I'll see you up in Crieff in a couple of weeks' time.
You will. All right. Cheers.
Fantastic. Cheers, mate. Take care.
Bye. Cheers. Thanks, Carl.
Okay, so let me just stop recording on that.